So, BC, you don't know who Keenan and Kel are?
Oh, we're gonna open up with this, aren't we?
Well, I just want the audience to know. You do you not know Keenan and Kel?
I don't know the show. I know the movie. I know who
Well,
they are. I just didn't know the show.
do you know anything that Coolio did?
No.
Michael, what is
Really?
Coolio known for?
Gangsta's Paradise.
That's what
Uh,
AG said. And then I said, do you know Keenan and Kel? He's like, Key and Peele, dog? All right. Welcome in. This is the Three and Out podcast here alongside Mike Cicchetti and Brett Schaubs. I am Ben Pope, doing a little shift up here ahead of week 4 here in the NFL. We are getting really pumped up. We've got an exciting slate of games this week. But before we get into all of that, we are going to be talking about a little bit of the coverage back in week 3. We had an exciting week of games. Uh, Before we get into all that, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're trying to build up as much as possible and check out all our social medias at 3 and Out Pod 1.
We love you, Rob.
we do.
Right, Robert, we got to hang out, dog. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I've been begging and pleading with you. I liked your Jalen Green post, and what do I get? Crickets. But moving on. I love that man. All right, but moving on, we can start up here with one of the more anticipated games in the Week 3 slate, and that was the matchup between age-old quarterbacks Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, between the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Buccaneers coming into this game uh, with an undefeated record, but with a limited slate. They were missing pretty much all their wide receivers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones, all out for this game. And it kind of showed the Green Bay Packers were able to win this one 14-12. And yeah, they were able to make it a pretty close game there at the end, just losing by a 2-point conversion. But yeah, it's been kind of a rough go of it, at least from the outside looking in for honestly both quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers has been kind of figuring out how to run his Green Bay offense without the presence of Devontae Adams. There was kind of the emergence of Romeo Dubs this past week, had 8 catches and a touchdown. Tom Brady, he's been kind of working through it. And yeah, it's been kind of a rough start for the Tampa Bay quarterback, now uh, going on to his year 45 here. Not in the NFL, but in life. I don't know where I was going with that. But um, just because both quarterbacks have kind of started out a little bit slower than like kind of the way we both or we all anticipate, I should say. Um, I'll spin it over to Mike first. Who do you guys have more confidence in the rest of the year with the situations going on both in Tampa Bay and Green Bay? Is it Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady?
Honestly, they are very similar. Last season, they were both up there, right? In MVP. Aaron Rodgers won it. A lot of people made a case for Brady to win it. This year, their stats are very similar. If we're going on who I have more confidence in for the rest of the year, I would lean Tom Brady just because I can trust that offense more. And I know at full strength, at full health, with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Julio Jones, they just have a lot more chemistry, not as much Julio Jones. But when you look at the Green Bay Packers and Rodgers, he has basically all new receiver room he's working with. Romeo Dobbs, who will probably be wide receiver one by the end of the year, and he has that missing piece in Devonte Adams that there's been like a missing link in their offense, and it's been from the departure of Devonte Adams. They haven't really found that wide receiver one really. So at the end of the day, I trust Rodgers to get it done and figure it out because they do have depth at the position, although not super super great talent. But just in terms of the chemistry that Brady has with his receivers and that offense, I would lean Tom Brady.
Honestly, I'm kind of leaning more towards Rodgers on this one. Um, I feel like in years past, I've seen Aaron Rodgers sort of like fall flat on his feet like the first few games of the season. And as it progresses, they get stronger. And I'm not just talking about this year, I'm talking about a few years ago, right? We mentioned the Saints game that they had where they fell flat. And then as the year progressed, they got stronger and a lot stronger. There have been years where Rodgers will come out, have a few fumbles the first 3 weeks, and then go on to eventually win a Super Bowl, which is what he did against the Steelers about 7 or 8 years ago. So I get it. It's years past, but I trust Rodgers to get strength and sort of mesh together this offense as it goes. For the Buccaneers side, I trust Tom Brady to have that confidence and to have the ability with the weapons that he has, especially when everybody's back healthy and off suspension. I think that offense is more of a higher floor in Tampa Bay than so Green Bay. But I think just this year alone, I'd put more faith in Rodgers getting strength with the coaching staff than Tom Brady with a new coaching staff and a team that's known to be injury prone.
Yeah, I think if the question was phrased, who is more neat, I guess, how do I want to phrase this? Who is more necessary for their team's success? Like who needs to have the bigger season to really have their team succeed? I think the answer there is Aaron Rodgers.
Mhm.
But if we're going to say who do we have more confidence in for the rest of the season, I think I'm going to go with Tom Brady, and I think I'm just going to base it off his track record here in Tampa Bay thus far. I think I mentioned in last week's pod, but his passing numbers, I should say, have just been low for the first 3 games. Only 27 passing attempts against Dallas in week 1, 34 against the Saints in week 2. They bumped it up to 42 in week 3 because the run game wasn't really able to start anything with Leonard Fournette against Green Bay, which was not a surprising. Green Bay's run defense isn't usually their biggest strength, but they were able to really hold up strong. So they did a really good job there. Credit to Green Bay's run defense. But yeah, I think one of the big things is this past week, we saw Brady honestly overcome a decent amount of adversity. He didn't have Mike Evans, Julio Jones, and Chris Godwin, like I mentioned, using Brashad Perriman and Russell Gage kind of as his main threats there in the offense. And they were able to still, it's a 2-point conversion away from them coming away with going into overtime against Aaron Rodgers. Whereas Green Bay, they took a 2-score lead pretty quickly, and then you had the Aaron Jones fumble at the goal line, and then Rodgers just was not able to find it. Like he had one piece of adversity, and then he just kind of lost anything going for him. And we've seen similar things go on, not only in the playoff game last year against San Francisco when Mercedes Lewis had that fumble, and then Green Bay just fell apart the rest of the game. But I think just between their levels of overcoming adversity and just the fact that they're both dealing with trouble on their offensive line and just limited weapons, I think I'm just going to trust in Brady just a little bit more because I do think his passing numbers will go up. I think he'll be used more in the pass game as Todd Bowles gets more comfortable in his head coaching role. And I don't know. I think my confidence in Rodgers has kind of diminished since that playoff game in San Francisco. I'm kind of looking at him in a new lens, if you get what I'm saying. But with that, we can kind of transition from two quarterbacks that are struggling a little bit to a quarterback that is absolutely popping off, and that is Big Trust himself. That is Lamar Jackson, coming off a huge week in New England, 5 total touchdowns in the win on the road in New England against Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Absolutely phenomenal game for Lamar, and his stats through the first 3 games are honestly going on a pace of 16, 17 games. They're looking better than what he did in his MVP year. He's got 10 total or 10 passing touchdowns, 12 total. That is actually, it's been used all over the place, but he has more touchdowns than every team in the NFL except for Baltimore, which he plays for. He has been absolutely balling out, but I kind of looked back at our quarterback rankings from the offseason and everything and kind of where we ranked Lamar Jackson. It was pretty much the consensus between the 3 of us, Mike and Brett, that we had him around like the 7-8 spot in our quarterback rankings. after these first 3 games and what we've been able to see out of Lamar, do we think he should be viewed for the rest of the season as a top 5 quarterback in the league? I'll start with Brett.
I'm gonna go with yes. I think if you look at Lamar Jackson's not only efficiency as a mobile quarterback, but as a passer, working with what he has in a limited wide receiver room with Duvernay and Bateman and Likely, you wouldn't think that he'd be as efficient as he is now. But you look at his statistics for the first 3 games, and it's quite impressive, to be quite honest with you. And I mean, if you put his name up against some of the names that we talked about before who are in the top 5, guys like Herbert, Mahomes, Allen, Jalen Hurts, I think, can be considered in that conversation right now, statistically wise. But I think Lamar Jackson should absolutely be considered in that conversation. He's got the statistics to prove it. He's the talent. He's there. He's an MVP caliber quarterback. You can say that at this point. So I'm going to go with, yeah, I think he is going to be considered through the rest of the season as a top 5 talent at the quarterback position.
Yeah, no question. No question. I agree with that. And I think what plays a big part into not only Lamar's success, but Baltimore, their offensive, game planning success is Mark Andrews. He's really used as a security blanket for Lamar and their receiver room, who kind of has, like you mentioned, Brett. You have Rashad Bateman, who I do like. Still young, though, in his kind of first year starting. His rookie year last year was kind of interesting with the injuries. And Duvernay, who was never more than a really kick returner, who was kind of used more in the offense. I think there will be growing pains this season because they're kind of, they have new players. But I mean, at this point, Lamar, I don't know through 3 weeks how you can give him the MVP right now. And I think Baltimore kind of screwed up too, because Lamar's also playing this year. Like, I'm playing for my contract. I need to get paid. And if he keeps on this pace, he'll make a lot more than he was going to if they paid him in the offseason. So I do love Lamar. Great Q. And he's not a running back.
Yeah, I saw a really good comp. I want to say it was on FS1 yesterday. Basically acting like Aaron Judges in Major League Baseball right now. They're both in a contract year, and they're both playing out of their minds right now. I think Lamar, when we're talking about top 5 quarterbacks, honestly think he can be in that conversation, if not be in there right now. I think, honestly, for the way that I viewed the quarterbacks coming in this year, there are a few guys that I had in the top 5, namely Matthew Stafford and Russell Wilson, that have been honestly very disappointing to me thus far. And I think that can bump up Lamar just a little bit. I also think that some of the conversation with, and maybe this was myself overreacting, at least when I was doing quarterback rankings back in the offseason, but I think I might have overreacted to Lamar's lack of success in the postseason. But I think when you look at the game that he's presenting right now, and he has come over like a decent amount of adversity. We had talked about this a little bit during the beginning of last season as well. Him coming from a lot of 2-score deficits. They were dealing with a bunch of injuries that beginning part of the season. He was really playing like an MVP then, even though his numbers didn't really show it. Now I think his numbers do show it, and I think he's still playing like an MVP type level. I know he played 2 lower level teams in New England and with the Jets, and probably we'll see a better test this weekend against Buffalo. That's going to be a very anticipated matchup, him versus Josh Allen. But I do think that he is very much on the precipice, if not in that top 5 conversation. He's absolutely like blowing my mind. I think that maybe this is a good comparison. I think him and Kyler Murray are 2 guys that I've always had like a little bit of trouble deciphering like where they actually rank, because I think they're amazing talents, but I never knew like where their pass level was able to gain. Is it just the gimmick of them being a running quarterback that makes me like them so much? I think Lamar has definitely showed that he is able to control the passing game. The Ravens really haven't presented much of a run game in any of these 3 games, and Lamar's been the focal point of the offense. So I think I think I can trust him as a top 5 guy, at least going forward. We can go from talking about the highs of Lamar to a team that actually beat him in week 2. Big comeback there. And this is, of course, I might as well call him my beloved, the Miami Dolphins, man. Coming off a huge week 3 win in Miami against the supposed Super Bowl favorites, the Buffalo Bills. I know they were dealing with a little bit of a heat stroke, all these players coming in and out, but this was an unbelievable game. First of all, the numbers on Buffalo's side, they pretty much outpossessed Miami in this game 2-1, controlling the ball for nearly 40 minutes. Mike and I talked about this a little bit a couple days ago. Josh Allen had 63 pass attempts, and they lost. That is crazy. He had like 400 passing yards. But you got to give Miami credit. They have beaten now the Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens. We just talked about how good Lamar's been, and a solid New England team. They're going against Cincinnati this week on Thursday Night Football. We'll see how that goes. It's a short week for both teams. The Bengals coming off a win against the Jets. We'll kind of see what happens there if they're able to continue their momentum. They're 1-2. They're trying to pick up the steam before Baltimore and, surprisingly, Cleveland leave them in the dust. But let's talk about – yeah, I know. Cleveland's not been too bad.
Yeah.
They've also played like the Jets, the Steelers, and who?
Carolina.
Oh, Carolina. Oh, Baker.
The stats are the stats.
Baker. I don't want to talk about that man.
Poor soul.
Such a disappointing. Well, let's get back on topic. So Miami playing against the Bengals this week, coming off of 2 big wins, beating everyone's expectation except mine because I already had super high expectations for them. What more do the Dolphins need to do to become a legitimate Super Bowl contender? And we'll start with Mike here.
So I group the Miami Dolphins and the Eagles in the same category. To me, even coming into the year, they were both kind of identical teams. You have a solid offense on paper. You know the defense is good. Philly especially made a lot of additions defensively. And it was really just based off of quarterback play. And my answer would be the same. What more they need to do to prove to me with Miami and Philly, just more consistency. Because it all comes down to quarterback play for me. I know the defense is strong. They've been a top 10 unit for the past few years. The offense has looked on fire. If Tua keeps it up, I mean, that's the only thing they have left to prove. They can show that they can beat any team, and they did that against Baltimore, especially fighting through that 21-point comeback in week 2 and then beating Buffalo in week 3, which are 2 really, really solid statement wins for them. Yeah, that would be the only thing for me because they get hot. They're kind of like a Cincinnati in the way that if you get hot at the right time, you can, like Cincinnati did last year, got hot end of the year into the playoffs and made the Super Bowl. So just, keeping that consistency with especially Tua in that offense.
I think for me, especially for Miami, we've already seen so much from them, and I also had high expectations for them coming into the season. I think if they beat Cincinnati tonight, I think it's a big step in the right direction towards what we were talking about for being a Super Bowl caliber roster, or at least a deep playoff contender. I think the biggest thing that I personally need to see them going forward is just keeping this consistency. You have to play Buffalo one more time. You still have to play New England one more time. There are a few more other opponents down the line that they're going to have to prove themselves. It's still early into the season, and a lot of overreactions have happened before where we've seen teams go 3-4-0 to start and then sort of fizzle out a little bit. So if they can continue this win trend for another, we'll say out of 8 games, they win 6 of them, I'd consider them legit either deep playoff contender or potentially a Super Bowl contender in the AFC.
So I'll preface this with talking about their game this week against the Bengals. They have a complete hall pass for me. I don't care if they lose. I honestly expect Cincinnati to win because I think they've got probably the upper edge just because they played the Jets last week and Miami's coming off a hard fought victory against Buffalo. With the question though, I don't think they need to do anything, to be honest with you. I think Tua has proven enough to me. I know it's a 3-game sample size, but I honestly saw it in their win streak last year that he is able to keep them in ball games. He does not throw them out of ball games. That is a situation that a lot of quarterbacks with honestly like high upside. So like I'll talk about like Matthew Stafford, for example. He's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He won the Rams the Super Bowl last year, or was one of the key contributors to that. He also lost them like a lot of games in the regular season last year, and he had like very high volatility. That's not what Miami needs. They've had a very strong pass rush to begin this season, which I've been pleasantly surprised by. Tua has been one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the league. They've had really good. Their secondary has been really strong for a couple of years now. Honestly, since Xavier Howard came over in free agency, and I don't think we need to worry about their offense. They finally showed some life in the run game with Chase Edmonds getting a couple touchdowns against Buffalo, and then Raheem Mostert having a good game. He's honestly been getting more work than Edmonds has. I think the only question would be like with Tua, but I think he keeps them in ball games. He doesn't throw them out of ball games. That's what Miami is built for. Just have the quarterback keep you in the game, be able to hit your deep guys with Waddle and Hill on the occasion, make it work there. And then the defense kind of just does its own job. Like Baltimore kind of cooked them in the first half of the game, but they really settled down in the second half and let the offense have some opportunities, and they were able to catch up. Honestly, they are to me a true Super Bowl contender. I don't have really many concerns with them. Honestly, I don't disagree with you guys just seeing more from them, but I honestly thought I saw enough from them last season with some of the stuff they were working with previously. Now adding Mike McDaniel and the weapons that they have, I don't see any issues, to be honest. I think they're a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, and I agree with that because they've shown honestly more than enough, really. But it's just keeping. I always hit my laptop every single time, but they
That's a
always,
bug.
you just need to just need that to last throughout the season, and they got it. They can for sure make that case. Brett sending text over there.
Well, let's stay professional here, Mr. Shavs.
Oh man, you guys know it always happens at least once every.
Well,
episode.
usually you're the one in command, so we don't call you out, but I'm in charge. So let's mute that up, please. Thank you very much. Speaking of muting people up, the Dallas Cowboys, they're quieting the haters. Cooper Rush is quieting the haters. A second straight victory. I know it's against the Giants. I get it. No, it's against the Giants. I also know that they only scored like 6 points in the first half, but they honestly played really well in the second half. You saw a pretty good redemption for CeeDee Lamb. He dropped like a 40-yard catch in the second quarter, which was really, really bad. I honestly was a little bit worried just because he hadn't done very much in the previous 2 games. Honestly, came back, though. He had a really solid couple drives. We saw Zeke touchdown, which thank God he's actually got something going.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually building a little bit of confidence over there. I honestly think that they are showing a little bit of life. We know the Eagles, 3-0. They coming off a dominant victory against the Washington Commanders. Sacked Carson Wentz like 6 or 7 times in the first quarter alone. It was an absolute dominant victory. But with Dallas and with Dak being rumored to not be available this week against the Rams, or this week or next week against the Rams. There we go. But he's looking at like a week 6, week 7 return. That's been the reports. They've been honestly all over the place. So we'll kind of see what he does in practice, if anything. But with Dak coming back soon, Cooper Rush kind of being able to hold the load, do we think Dallas still has a chance to win the division in the NFC East? We'll go with Brett because we know he loves Jalen Hurts and the Eagles.
It's a flat out no. I didn't think they had a chance to begin with, even coming into the season. I thought this was the Eagles' division to lose. I don't know. I've never really had any sort of good expectations from Dallas. I've always sort of considered them a hot mess. I'll be brutally honest every single time when it comes to them. When Dak Prescott's back, I think their playoff chances increase dramatically as well. But as far as winning the division, I think this is Philly's division all the way.
I disagree with you.
Okay.
The Dallas Cowboys have exceeded my expectations on them since Cooper Rush has taken over, and they've looked decent. They've looked pretty solid. Dak Prescott is ahead of schedule because he was originally going to miss like 6 to 8 weeks, and now he's been kind of moving closer to that 4 to 6 mark. But it again kind of goes back into the point about the Dolphins. We've seen 3 weeks of this Philly team, and I know that the Dallas Cowboys, they have more experience on their roster. Once Dak comes back, and once they're at really full strength, that defense I don't love, but they've been playing fine. So when Dak does come back, I still think Philly will take the division. But I think Dallas could make it, competitive. I don't see Philly running away with it unless they just could be a few weeks from now and they just still look dominant. Then they're 6-0, 7-0, it's theirs. But I don't think that it's as clear cut for Philly to win because of how Cooper Rush has kept this team competent.
Brett almost fell out of his seat with that sneeze. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
So first things first, anyone that is, and this is, I hate the fact that I do this to myself, but I tend to watch freaking First Take sometimes, First Things First, all these shows on like FS1 and ESPN. The conversations that Cooper Rush has any shot of keeping this job over Dak, that is blasphemous.
No.
That is ridiculous. That is narrow-minded. To answer the question at hand, though, they have absolutely a chance. I'm honestly viewing this team in a very similar stance, and tell me if you think I'm wrong on this. The Niners. The Niners have Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. Very limited there. The Cowboys are functioning with a backup quarterback, but they both have a very good, if not elite, pass rush, a solid enough O-line.
No.
And they've
No.
got good enough.
Your
turn, Michael.
Okay, continue.
They've got a solid enough O-line to be able to hold things together. I know Trent Williams just went out for the Niners. And they've got elite weapons all over the place. I know that they're missing Elijah Mitchell on the Niners side, but Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Dallas side. You got CeeDee Lamb, you got Zeke and Pollard, who kind of combined together for one player. Zeke more of the goal line back and pass catching back, and Tony Pollard had a really good game on the ground yesterday, or not yesterday, on Monday. And then Dalton Schultz has been a really consistent tight end for them for the past 2 years. I think when Dak comes back, their ceiling obviously raises up and everything. But I honestly think that they've got really good tools all over the football field, aside from at quarterback right now. I think they'll be able to win games in a similar manner. And I can't really count them out. Like, if Cooper Rush was not keeping them in ball games and they were like 1-5 when Dak comes back, that's obviously like way too much for them to overcome. But I think he'll be able to carry them to like a 500 record until Dak comes back. And I think that's good enough to where they're able to still have a shot at this division when Prescott comes back. I think that the only troubling thing is, and we dealt with the same thing last year, is will Mike McCarthy get in the Cowboys' way? He really hasn't done that so far in the 2 games against Cincinnati and against the Giants. But we can wait and see see if he eventually does something there. Mike, you disagreed though.
I get the comparison. I get what you're saying. I just think the team around Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco is a lot stronger than Dallas's team, especially defensively and offensive line wise.
I'd say similar, but like I still think the Niners secondary is really bad. I think the Cowboys at least have a little bit better there. They probably have a worse O line, and then I think their D lines are pretty similar. And the Trent Williams injury you got to factor in as well.
I'll say
Right.
this. I think that as far as defenses as a whole go, I think the 49ers have a slight edge when they're completely healthy. I think Dallas's secondary, though, is still, in terms of talent, better than San Francisco's. If I look at just efficiency and the way these two teams have played in the last few weeks, I'd honestly argue that Dallas has played better offensive football than San Francisco has. And I've honestly kind of believed this for a while, and it sounds like a blasphemous take. I genuinely believe that Cooper Rush has a more efficient time in this Dallas offense than Dak Prescott has. They just click. They click. And if you watch Cooper Rush in training camp, because I've had these conversations with other people before, there's something about it that it just looks right. I don't know how to describe it in a way because Dak Prescott's been there for so long and Cooper Rush hasn't really gotten an opportunity to show what he's had as the one. This is sort of his first opportunity, really, to start for the Cowboys. I don't know. There's not really much evidence behind it statistically wise and consistency wise because he hasn't been the starter. Dak Prescott's been a Pro Bowl quarterback. But in the first few games in the small sample share that I've had, I honestly believe that Cooper Rush in 2 games looked a lot more efficient with that offense than Dak Prescott did through 3.5, almost a full game in the opener against
You can't compare that though, in my opinion. You can't compare
At
3/4 of Dak to 2 games of a.
When Dak was healthy in the first half against Tampa Bay, they didn't look that good, to be quite honest with you. I wasn't a fan. Offense was kind of scrambled. You look at the first half against Cincinnati, Cooper Rush honestly may not have been a star, but was at least somewhat efficient and was able to keep the Bengals down and to keep them, keep the Cowboys in the ball game. So I get it's a difficult argument to make. It's an extremely difficult argument to make, but it's just a thought.
You can't compare those two because of the defenses as well, though.
Again, this is why I'm saying it's a very difficult argument to make. I need to see so much more out of Cooper Rush. Honestly,
what are you inferring though?
Yeah,
I'm inferring there's a chance that Cooper Rush could be
No.
a better quarterback long term than Dak Prescott.
no.
No
So
way.
here's what I'll say right here. So in this Cincinnati game, I'll use it because I think this is a perfect example. Cooper Rush had like a 14-3 lead, 17-3 lead, something like that, and then was completely stagnant on offense when he had a lead. Dak Prescott would never have done that, to be honest with you. He would have at least put up somewhat of a fight, keeping the offense moving. And I think that's really tough to say when Cooper Rush, who was on their team, like in training camp, they saw him last year, they saw him in training camp, they looked at him and they were like, oh, we can cut this man and just keep Dak on the roster. They added him prior to week 2 or prior to like week 1, just because they needed an extra quarterback. But they saw enough to be like, yeah, we don't care about Cooper Rush. Anyone else can pick him up. Like,
Are you trying to make a case that once Dak is healthy, they're still going to roll with Cooper Rush?
No, I think they're absolutely going to Dak. I mean, I think that's where this team's heading. I just don't think. How do I explain this properly?
are you
'Cause
trying?
like
Are
I
you
said-
trying to say that you think Cooper Rush is able to run the offense that they have been using this 3 weeks better than Dak can?
As of now, I've seen specific portions of it where it could be the case. Yes.
So with that, that is an issue on Dallas's part because Dak Prescott is their franchise quarterback. This man is a top 12 quarterback in the league,
I agree.
if not top 10. You need to rephrase around him. Like the Tampa Bay game, that was one game that's also one of probably top 3, top 5 defenses in the league.
Mm-hmm.
It's one game. We saw him play this exact defense last year, and he tore him up for 400 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He did phenomenal against them. So,
Yeah. Like I
don't
mentioned before, it's a thought. It's not a argument that was meant to be like sort of backed around a lot of evidence. I'm just sort of speculating and just thoughts in my head, quick lingerings, but we can move on from this because obviously it's a discussion that can shut down very quick.
lingering song. What is lingering in BC's head? Well, you know what is lingering in my head? The Los Angeles Rams have not looked good at all this season, yet they are still clearly the class of the NFC West. We've seen the Niners play with 2 games now with Jimmy Garoppolo, 1-1. They showcased us one of the worst showings on Sunday Night Football that we've seen in a couple years against your lovely Denver Broncos. Congrats on the win, by the way, and wasting 3 hours of everyone's time. We've seen Seattle beat up on those same Denver Broncos, not to keep the ball rolling here. And then they've just been the team that we thought they were, not that good with Geno Smith under center. And the Cardinals, they have been one of the roller coaster teams of the season so far. 2 really bad losses against the Rams and the Chiefs, and then a come from behind victory against the Raiders. The Rams, though, this is where I want to focus in. They beaten the Cardinals, they beaten the Falcons, and they had a really rough loss first game of the season against the Bills. Yet they are still number 1 in the division. Do we think that the NFC West is just clearly the Rams to lose? Like, do we think that it'll be them getting in their own way if they don't win this division? We'll go with Brett here.
I still think this is the Rams' predominant division. Again, we've talked about this so many times before. The Rams, obviously, in the first 3 weeks, have not looked like the Rams we saw winning the Super Bowl from last year. They lost a lot of pieces. It's sort of a new mesh on the offensive line. And Matt Stafford sort of had some growing pains going into this year. I think it's going to come down to whether or not the 49ers and Cardinals can string something together, either coaching or, in the 49ers case, catching Jimmy Garoppolo up to speed again and getting this offense working like it did at the end of last year. It's going to be a marathon in the NFC West. I don't think you're going to see who really wins it until the very end. If what we've seen now is going to be the case throughout the whole season. But if you're going to make a guess now, I still think this is the Rams' division to win.
So I guess just to clarify, so the question is, if the Rams don't win this division, will it be their own fault or the competition presenting them? Where would you lead there, Brett?
I'd probably say it's their own fault. You've got too much talent not to win the division. You upgraded your defense significantly with Bobby Wagner. You still have Jalen Ramsey and all of pretty much your corner pieces together. Losing Darius Williams to Jacksonville was a tough loss behind Jalen Ramsey. But honestly, I think if they do end up losing this division to either San Francisco or Arizona, it's got to be their own fault. Because the way either of those other teams are trending right now, you shouldn't have to lose the division in that kind of fashion.
All right, Mike, I see you shaking your head. What do you think?
No, it is they're the favorites to win the division. I don't think that the rest of the NFC West just can give them a run for the division. I absolutely think San Francisco can. Even with Jimmy Garoppolo, who I've always been tough on, but he's been on that. He's been, captain quarterback of that team for the past handful of years. He's gotten them to the Super Bowl. He's got them to the NFC Championship just last year, and they've gotten better defensively, in my opinion, and offensively, they still roll the same. I think the Rams, kind of being off to the slow start is a blessing for the 49ers because they could say, look, let's try to take this thing. Let's give the Rams some competition. I don't think Arizona can do much. I think they'll be a fun team. I don't think they'll be, towards the top of that division, however. But I absolutely think the San Francisco 49ers can challenge the Rams for the West.
I think if Jimmy Garoppolo is able to string the offense together and get caught up to speed quickly, I 100% agree. I think the 49ers do have a chance of winning this division because they've had and have the talent to do so. But if, say he doesn't string it together and things fall apart, it's the Rams' fault.
How? No, what? So if Jimmy Garoppolo can't get the offense together, that's the Rams' fault?
If Jimmy Garoppolo struggles, but the 49ers are still winning football games, right? If the Rams sort of stoop down to that level, it's their own fault for putting themselves in that position to keep it close in the division. They should be running away with it with the talent that they have and sort of take advantage in that division while everybody's still down. Arizona, you mentioned it right on the dot. They're a fun team. I just don't think they're properly coached, and I don't think they necessarily have the capability as of this moment in time to win the division.
That same argument, and we're not even going to talk about Seattle, your third favorite team.
No.
But you can make the same exact argument that you're making for the 49ers, though. The Rams are, not looking great. Let's try to take advantage because the Rams and 49ers, I don't think there's a huge drop-off between those teams.
I'd say the drop-off between the two is, at the end of the day, it's whether or not the offenses can hold together. I think the defenses have their ups and downs. I'd obviously take LA's over San Francisco's, but
defense?
Yes.
Okay.
You have
to
factor in.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, defensive lines.
You're right.
You know what I'm saying? So,
yep.
At the end of the day, it's going to come down to can either Matt Stafford or Jimmy Garoppolo pull an offense together to stay efficient and help the defense win football games. You're right. At this point, you probably could make an argument. If the Rams aren't looking good, Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan get this together and say, hey, let's make some improvements. Let's take a step up here in this shot, and let's potentially try and win this division. Same can go for the Rams side. If they go ahead and look at Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers and say, hey, these guys aren't getting their stuff together, let's step up a little bit, be like we were last year, and win some football games. I think at this point in the season, just from what we've seen from a small sample share, this is the Rams division, right? The 49ers had every opportunity in the world to take down a hurt Broncos team last Sunday night. Didn't look so good. Between, I think, both sides, there were 20 punts at least, right? Between both sides. Not looking good as far as efficiency from the 49ers through Jimmy Garoppolo's first start. Again, it's a small sample share, but long-term speaking, it could even out.
Yeah, I guess we'll see this upcoming weekend. They've got the matchup together. Is that Monday night? It might be. But they do play each other this weekend, I believe, in San Francisco. So that'll be an interesting matchup, to say the least. I just for time's sake, we'll get on to the last point here. We'll talk about two teams with honestly kind of upset victories this past week in the AFC South. We've got the Colts with their special teams ridden victory. The Chiefs making some really ugly errors. Matt Ryan able to come through with a couple touchdowns to rookie tight end Jelani Woods. A very solid game.
Brett's boy.
She's
Jeez.
can you
Continue.
even spell Jelani?
Jaleni.
That's
No.
incorrect. We'll move on.
Jelani.
Huh?
Did I say G or J?
You said Jay.
Okay. Jelani.
There you go.
Great job. Okay, we just spent time spelling Jelani. So we had the Colts win against the Chiefs this week. Special teams errors all over the place for the Chiefs. Very sloppy game. Then we saw the Jaguars go into SoFi to take down the 1-1, now 1-2 Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, Justin Herbert dealing with an injury during that game, but it was the Jaguars offense that really kicked things into gear. James Robinson with a couple touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence, 3 through the air to Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, and Zay Jones, the Jones brothers there. The Jonas brothers? Jones brothers?
Bonus Jonas.
Bonus Jonas? We'll see. Not Jonas Valanciunas. Shout out George.
Oh my lord.
Oh my God. We'll ignore that.
My apologies.
So 2 really big victories by both teams. Which statement win should we take more value with? The Jaguars or the Colts? We'll start off with Mike here.
The Jaguars. Easy. Where do I begin? Like, you value the way you look at the Jaguars team and the Colts team, not as of where they are right now, but where you viewed them coming into the year. You expected the Colts to be a lot better than the Jaguars, unless you're just a super huge Jags fan, right? But you viewed the Colts to be better than the Jaguars are, and the Jaguars statistically are better than the Colts, but the Colts winning over the Chiefs from a preseason standpoint wouldn't be super shocking because the Colts on paper are a good team. I expected them to be, win that division, and now it's kind of like a toss-up. The Jaguars going into, was that game in LA?
It was in LA.
Although LA was kind of beat down, Joey Bosa went out at some point. Herbert's still dealing with that injury. That's still a big win. A win's a win. And they beat them by what? 4 possessions? I think no question that Jaguars over the Chargers win is a bigger statement than the Colts over the Chiefs, because the Colts are expected, or I'm at least expecting the Colts to be to that level. I expected the Colts to be a top 5 team in the AFC, and they aren't playing like such.
Yeah, I'm honestly with Mike here. I will very much value the Jaguars win more than the Colts win over Kansas City. This was my game to watch going into week 3, the Jaguars and Chargers, because I honestly thought the Jaguars had a legitimate chance to win this football game, despite other beliefs. I think that the big reason why Jacksonville has been so successful to this point is because they're much better managed under Doug Peterson than with Urban Meyer. I almost literally forgot his name because that's how irrelevant he's been in the last 6 months. Sorry, Urban. But yeah.
Don't be sorry for that, man.
Yeah, no. But I think they finally clicked. I think this is Trevor Lawrence's offense. It may not necessarily have the star power yet to accompany with Lawrence, but it's heading in that direction. They figured out sort of the scheme that they want to work with, and they're winning football games. And I think at this point, even with the small sample share, you could make the argument Jacksonville wins the division. Obviously, Indianapolis hasn't looked good. Yes, they had the win against Kansas City, but they had 2 major flukes, not only against the Texans, but against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's a big division game when it's gonna come down to the end. So I'm gonna value the Jags game more. And I think I'm going to value them as a whole a lot more going forward.
Well, you were saying they were a division contender last week, wasn't it? Who said that? Might have been BC. I don't remember.
Oh, it was him. It was him. It was him.
What was that?
It was Brett.
Oh, okay. Well, I remember, and this is a good transition here to our 2-minute drill. We talked about teams that were yay and nay on contenders or pretenders last week. I do specifically remember, and maybe this was a conflicting statement here, both of you were nay on the Jaguars. We'll see what happens there, but we're going into the 2-minute drill. So we're hoping for quick responses here on hard-hitting questions that maybe aren't as big topics coming into the week, but I still wanted to talk about them just a little bit. So we have the Thursday night matchup that is one of the most anticipated games of the week with Miami versus Cincinnati. We've seen the vaunted duo of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle kind of pop off, not only in week 2, but they've just been phenomenal to start the season in Miami, going up against a Cincinnati team with their own vaunted duo in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins that really haven't had the opportunity to really pop off as a duo yet this year. But I'll toss it over to Brett first. As a wide receiver duo, who would you take? Jamar Chase and T. Higgins or Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill?
I don't think there's a question on that. It's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They're much more dynamic, I think, in my opinion, than Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think there's still some left to prove between the other two in Cincinnati. But I will very much take Chase and Waddle over, or Hill and Waddle, over Chase and Higgins.
Mike, what say you?
I would agree with that, but Brett, I think you were a slave to the recency.
Fair enough.
I think you're kind of undervaluing Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. At least in the statement you said, but I agree with you. I would take Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle over Jamar and T. Higgins.
Good thing I'm the host for this segment because I would be ripping you both a new one for disrespecting Chase and Higgins, who I think are by far and away the best duo in the league. But we'll pause on that. So we've had a couple teams, or honestly, we've got 4 teams here that we want to talk about here, all under 500, looking for bounce back wins this week. I'm talking about specifically the Chargers, the Bengals, the Saints, and the 49ers. All these teams under 500 out of a playoff spot currently through the first 3 weeks. Mike, I'll turn over to you first. Which one of these 4 teams under 500 do you have the most faith in bouncing back?
Long-term wise?
We'll say in the short term, so this week.
Chargers, Bengals, Saints, and
the Niners. You can say in long term if that's an easier question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would take the 49ers.
Okay.
I would want to go the Chargers, but their injuries are kind of deterring me from choosing them. The Saints I love, but I'm staying away from them now. I think the Bengals do have a good case as well. And the Bengals kind of fall into my pick with the 49ers. I just think that it's all about the chemistry. It's all about the chemistry with Jimmy G. Once Trent Williams comes back from his ankle sprain, I think they will click and give the Rams a run for their money.
Bredethan?
Forgot about that name.
Honestly, I have no idea. I'm going to leave it at that.
You have no idea?
Repeat the question.
Give it an answer. It's a 2-minute drill. Give an answer.
Repeat the question one more time, and I'll give you a 10-second response.
Who do you have most faith in? Chargers, 49ers, Bengals, Saints.
They're all under 500. Who do you think is going to bounce back?
Chargers.
Why? Yeah.
I think it's straightforward. They have the talent. Once Justin Herbert's healthy, that offense meshes together again. I think the only piece they're missing is just figuring out the rest of the coaching. If it's not the Chargers, it's Cincinnati by far. I still have them potentially winning the division, but I think the Chargers are going to have the biggest bounce back.
No, I will tell you now, it's not the Chargers.
Well, we'll see in the next couple weeks. Mike,
I
you
hope
gave
I hope you're right. I hope you're right because I love the Chargers, but Rashawn Slater being out for the year, Joey Bosa missing a lot of the year. I'm not liking that.
That's a tough one. And well,
Liking
you
that.
kind of highlighted a little bit in your soliloquy there with the 49ers. We're talking about injuries for this next portion. Injuries in week 3 that worry us the most. We had Trent Williams go down with a high ankle sprain. He is likely to be missing 4 to 6 weeks at the very least, possibly more. You never know with high ankle sprain, especially with a lineman. That honestly is really tough to deal with there. Prayers up, Myles Garrett. He got into a car crash on Tuesday. He was dealing with both bicep injuries and shoulder injuries. He is planning to return to practice on Thursday, but that is still up in the air if he's going to be able to play this weekend against the Falcons. So Myles Garrett. And then Joey Bosa just got placed on the IR with a groin strain, out a minimum of 4 weeks, but it's looking to be a little bit more. Which of those 3 injuries, Trent Williams, Myles Garrett, Joey Bosa, worries you the most? We'll start with Brett.
Honestly, if you're taking a look at the injuries as a whole, I think the Myles Garrett one is going to have a really big impact on how this Cleveland defensive line holds together. But I honestly think the biggest injury that's going to have much more of an impact than people expect is the Rashawn Slater injury that happened with the Chargers.
That was not one of the options.
I know. That's why I'm saying it. I think it's a different option. I think it's going to have more than
Okay, so screw my segment. Okay, go ahead.
Ben said that's not one of my options. Brett said, I know it's a different option. I think it's the Trent Williams injury. I'm just jumping back into things. Jimmy Garoppolo as a quarterback, he needs protection. He can't get out of his own way, and we know how injury prone as a quarterback that he is. So I think that will be very big. As Brett sends another message. Having Trent Williams miss like half the year, I think will be hard because of how impactful not only he is to that team, but in league wide, he's arguably the best tackle in the league.
For sure. And with the new deal under center, this is not something you want to be dealing with a first year, as Mike is going off screen because he's laughing at Brett. All right. Well, our last point here in the 2-minute drill, this is something that I personally want to talk about because I want to get your opinion on this. Mike, at least give me the courtesy of muting, dog.
My fault. Go ahead.
Giggle fest over here.
Go ahead.
Didn't think we'd be talking about this game, guys, but we're talking about the Jets and the Steelers, and this is the return of Zach Wilson to the lineup for the New York Jets, something that the Steelers couldn't capitalize on, switching their quarterbacks. The Jets actually have a mind in doing that. What are our expectations for Zach Wilson, and do we honestly think this is an upgrade for them starting Zach Wilson over Joe Flacco, who did give them a victory in week 2?
What was that last question?
Just overall thoughts on Zach Wilson coming back, and do we think it's a clear upgrade for the team winning, upgrading over Joe Flacco?
No.
Okay.
At least not short term wise. He's obviously, you're giving him the keys to the franchise, so whenever he's healthy, you're going to give him. But Joe Flacco's been playing really good. He's top 5
in passing yards.
And he's been really solid for them. I don't think that is really like super sustainable though. So Zach Wilson coming back, I think he's going to be off to I'm expecting kind of a slow start at first for Zach Wilson. I think he can figure it out. Me and Ben have great faith in Zach Wilson as a quarterback. So I think that eventually when you look at it at the end of the year, he'll really be in the last few weeks. He'll really be into kind of his groove.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of with Mike here. I think going forward, I think at least short-term wise, it's not going to be much because you really don't know what you're going to be getting out of Zach Wilson in the first few weeks, especially coming off of an injury. And because Joe Flacco, like Mike mentioned, was playing so well in the first 3 weeks, I think long term they'll be okay. It's just a matter of seeing how Wilson's going to create some chemistry with these really new and young weapons in the offense. But I have faith as well that he'll be okay.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Zach Wilson will be able to beat up on Joe Flacco's 29 QBR pretty easily. So I think that Zach Wilson is a clear upgrade. But hey, man, that was the 2-minute drill. We will hop into now our games of the week for week 4 here in the NFL. We've got a great slate of matchups here. We'll go over to Mike first with his game of the week.
My game of the week is Viking Saints in London Sunday morning at 9:30 Eastern time.
I'll be snoozing at that time, dog.
I was, looking at the schedule week 1. I said these are going to be two of the top teams in the NFC. This is going to be a must-watch. Set the alarm for 8:30 and get ready for this one. I might even not set an alarm for this one. No, but no, I really like this matchup because not only do I like both of these teams, but I think this is going to be like a big prove-it game for both of them because both of these teams have a lot to prove. The Vikings had a great first game against Green Bay. They looked like, top team in the NFC. The last 2 weeks, they almost lost to Detroit this past week, and they lost week 2 to Philly. They have something to prove. Justin Jefferson, he hasn't looked like that elite receiver since week 1. He had that big game, but he's been kind of underwhelming these past 2 weeks. And then even on the Saints side, Jameis Winston has been in and out of practice this week. They said he is a go for the game, but the Saints, again, Jameis Winston has played 1-2 good quarters of football so far this season. So with the Saints, them even defensively, they have a lot to prove. I think these teams are pretty evenly matched as well. I do value the Vikings higher, but in terms of how both of them are right now, the Jameis Winston injuries, plural, scares me a little bit. But yeah, I like this, a little prove a game for both teams. And I'm kind of losing faith in both of them as the week's gone. It is early though. So we will see. We will see how they do.
Yeah, don't want to overreact. Plus, I know that both Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry have been in and out of practice all this week. I don't think Michael Thomas has practiced at all. Jarvis Landry was limited on Thursday, so we'll see if they'll be able to suit up. If not, it'll be a big role for rookie wide receiver Chris Olave. Brett, what is your game of the week?
My game of the week is the game happening tonight, and that is the Dolphins and Bengals game. I think this is going to be one of the more entertaining games of the week, not only because both of these teams had so much anticipation and excitement coming into this year, especially into this matchup, but I think this is going to show the NFL that there are some different teams starting to be on the rise and to sort of challenge the big brothers of the Bills, the Chiefs, the Rams. And I think it starts with these two, right? Cincinnati proved it last year. Miami's starting to prove it this year. Now we get to see them together and sort of see who comes out and who becomes the better squad, at least in this head-to-head matchup. They're both coming off of short weeks. Obviously, Miami, I think, had a bit more of an exhausting game than Cincinnati did in New York. But I think as a whole, I think Miami and Cincinnati is going to be an exciting matchup to watch.
Sorry, just keeping in my notes. That is 4 straight weeks now that Miami has made the game of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. So I would be remiss to not mention the Buffalo-Baltimore game that's happening on Sunday, but that is not my game of the week. My game of the week is the Denver Broncos versus the Las Vegas Raiders going on in Vegas this weekend. Both of these teams have been playing like garbage to me. One is leading the division, and one is at the bottom of the division. both these teams, it's must win for me. I understand that the Broncos are 2-1. They can lose this game, but they can't play like they have the first 3 weeks. There's got to be some clicking point with Russell Wilson in this offense because the defense has played great. They played great. I understand that they've played Geno Smith, Davis Mills, and Jimmy Garoppolo. So they got to test this week with Derek Carr at the very least. But the defense is playing well. I got to see something from this offense, man. And then on the Raiders side of things, I just got to see some sort of semblance and consistency. Like, at least we saw something against the really good Chargers defense in week 1. Devontae Adams had a really phenomenal game. We saw Mac Hollins pop off the past couple weeks. Is that a person to keep track of now? He's like the other outside receiver now, taking the spot of like Zay Jones and Bryan Edwards from last year. I guess that's a thing. But yeah, I'm just interested to see where these teams land. I think it's must win for both. The Raiders are 0-3. They got to win this game if they want any chance of actually like giving their fans hope of running for the playoffs. Josh McDaniels, you got to show something as a head coach. Almost as much as Nathaniel Hackett, you both got to show up. So I got to see something from either of these teams. It might not be the most flashy game of the week, but it is my game of the week. And with that, we are moving on to, from a more somber note to a little bit of a happier note here. We'll be talking about our stand sessions for the week, people that we have loved their performance in week 3, and we want to highlight them just a little bit more. Brett, you're looking over your notes there. You're muted up. Why don't you go off with your first stand of the week?
Well, absolutely, Ben. My first stand, I'm a Khalil Herbert stan. Oh, baby. Khalil Herbert, 157 yards, 2 tutties on the day for the Bears. This offense is really weird, and you can never tell who's going to be better in the run game, if it's Montgomery or if it's Herbert. This past week, it just so happened to be Khalil Herbert over David Montgomery, and he had one of the best games we've seen out of a running back this season so far. And I was very impressed with how he handled himself. I think this is the first time we've seen Herbert be legit like this with Chicago in the last year and a half we've seen him. But yeah, I'm a Khalil Herbert stan.
Yeah, can't believe that was honestly a person that I was considering. No chance of us both covering a Bears player, but I do like that one, Brett, a lot. And yeah, we'll go over to Mike for his first stand of the week.
I'm a Trevor Lawrence stan.
T-Law.
You know, he's turning into a little budding star right in front of our eyes. 3 touchdowns on the game against the Chargers. A lot of flack for him in his rookie year after underperforming. Now he's with a competent coach in Doug Peterson, who's going to work wonders for that team and the offense. And I think Trevor Lawrence is a star in the making. Shout out T-Law.
All right, very nice there. We'll go from one Lawrence to another. My first stand of the week is DeMarcus Lawrence from the Dallas Cowboys. He made Evan Neal look like his son this past Monday. My goodness, he played really bad. But hey, DeMarcus Lawrence played really well. 3 sacks on the game against the Giants O-line, and Daniel Jones was one of the main forces on defense that entire game. Really popped off. We haven't seen DeMarcus Lawrence act like this in a game for a little bit now. Hopefully he can give some, additional support alongside Micah Parsons on that D-line. Dallas defense, something that has really impressed me so far in the 3 games. They had a really good season. They lost Randy Gregory this past offseason to the Denver Broncos. Hopefully DeMarcus Lawrence can kind of pick up the pace and keep up what he was doing this past week. Hopefully show that we should have some faith, not only in that Dallas defense as a whole, but the D-line. I got DeMarcus Lawrence as my first stand. Brett, we'll go on to your second stand of the week.
All right. Yeah. My next stand, I'm in a Giro Evero stand.
No way.
Giro Evero is the defensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos. Here comes the bias on the 3 and Out podcast.
No way
Shout out.
he pulled this garbage.
It ain't garbage, and I'm going to explain why. The Denver Broncos have been top 5 in second half defenses as far as total points allowed through the first 3 weeks of the season. The defensive line has increased their sack numbers in the first 3 weeks, double in the first 3 seasons. His secondary has looked phenomenal through the last 3 weeks in the second half alone. I'm not saying Ejiro Evero just because I'm a Broncos fan and because they've won their last 2 football games.
Brett.
Let me
Yes, you
explain.
are.
No, let me explain. Let me explain. All bias aside, you can't knock the fact that the Broncos defense has looked so much better in the last 3 games than it did through the last 10 last year. It has looked far better, I'd argue. Even when Von Miller was there, something has looked a lot more efficient, and you can't take it away. So
you know what I'd argue?
What's that?
Broncos would be undefeated if they had Vic Fangio.
It's a whole lot of garbage, and you know that.
You know what I'd like to bring up? The thing that I said 5 minutes ago. They've played Geno Smith, Davis Mills, and Jimmy Garoppolo in his first start.
Both coaches don't know how to game manage right now, so no comment.
Are you? That might be worse than a kicker. That might be worse than a kicker.
Nope.
Okay, Mike. Save me here. Go ahead with your second stand of the week.
All right. My second stand, did end up losing this game, but I just wanted to highlight this player. I talked about T-Law turning into a star in front of our eyes. This man is turning into a star in front of our eyes. Nick Bolton, Chiefs linebacker. Not only he tied the game in tackles, he's a tackle machine, bro. And not only did he rack up his first sack in his career, but he got 2 sacks. His first 2 sacks ever in his career. Kind of surprising, but makes sense because of his role on that defense. Yeah, I think he is kind of, going to emerge himself as the top player on that defense alongside Chris Jones. And I think sky's the limit. Sky's the limit with that kid. So shout out to my guys, my youngins, T-Law and Nick Bolton.
Well, I'll keep the youngster trend going. I'm a Romeo Doubs stan. I am a big fan of this 4th-round wide receiver out of Nevada. Had a really good game as the kind of de facto wide receiver 1 for Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in their 14-12 victory against Tampa Bay. 8 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown. They were missing Sammy Watkins in this game. They were missing their higher drafted receiver in the 2nd round, Christian Watson, this week as well. He has been missing some time to practice as well. And they had mentioned specifically Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers both before their week 3 matchup. We have to get Romeo Doubs more involved in this offense. He had a pretty quiet first couple weeks after a lot of hype in the offseason and preseason about how much progress he's made with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of talk that, Aaron Rodgers doesn't like his rookie receivers. Well, he was really efficient with Romeo Doubs. A lot of short passes that Doubs was able to get open on. Really great passes by Rodgers, and they were able to kind of fit the seam between the Tampa Bay secondary. I really like what Romeo Doubs was able to do. Hopefully he's able to keep this up, maybe add some more depth to the offense with Allen Lazard being more of a deep ball specialist. But yeah, I am a Romeo Doubs stan for week 3. And with that, we are completed with our stand session here and also wrapping up here on the 3 and Out podcast here, episode 6 of the 2022-2023 NFL season. Once again, make sure to like and subscribe. If you enjoyed the episode, check out all our social medias, 3 and Out Pod 1. And for Mike Cicchetti and Brett Shavs, I'm Ben Pope. I'm not Brett, but take care. Brett your hair.